Okay, I was muted. So, what's up, my friends? How's everybody doing tonight? I got this comment on my last hangout. Bring up Pro Choices 11. I thought it was worthy of a hangout. I thought it was worthy to start a nice little conversation. But this user by the name of CTAH19 gives a hypothetical situation. So he says, a very hypothetical situation, but bear with me. Let's say that science has advanced to the point that embryos can be implanted into males. A woman who was pregnant but doesn't want the baby. She spots some guy, let's call him Antonio, proselytizing about pro life on the street corner and stalks him, hits him over the head, and Antonio wakes up, having later undergone the medical procedure to transfer the embryo. Should Antonio accept all medical risk, financial burden, and be forced to carry the fetus to term, or should he have the option to remove the embryo? Excuse me. If I cough every now and again, I'm still getting over a cold, so apologize for that. But anyway, there's a couple of things. I understand this is a hypothetical scenario, but before I even entertain that, I mean, if you're gonna give a scenario, at least make it possible. At least I'm not even saying this got to be realistic, but at the very least, make it possible. But not only is his scenario not possible, I mean, not only is his scenario not realistic, it's also not possible. So, I mean, pro boards like to push these to the most impossible hypothetical situations to try to make a fallacious argument. Again, I'm not even saying something necessarily has to be realistic, but it has to at the very least be possible. But going back to the fact that this is a hypothetical, let's entertain it. Well, what I would do, I would carry that embryo to term. That's just me. Whether I actually had the option to do so or not. Let's say I had the option not to. I'd do it, or at least I'd like to think I would. Who knows? It may very well be the case my feelings would be influenced if either I were a woman or I were able to conceive and carry that entity to term. I mean, but it's always possible somebody's feelings would be influenced, or people would think up things differently if they were in different situations, or if they were born, if they were, if a woman was born a man, or if a man was born a woman, it's always very possible that they look at things differently. But um, well, so what? If I were to look at things differently, why would that provide any evidence whatsoever that abortion is right or wrong, or whether we should permit it in our laws, whether abortion is morally permissible or not? Just because there are circumstances to where I might look at things differently, hypothetically, or if I was born a woman, or if I had different circumstances in life when I adopted different beliefs and things like this, that doesn't provide any evidence to whether the act of abortion itself is morally permissible, should be permitted in our laws or not. So, I mean, this is a really nonsensical hypothetical to even bring up because, I mean, whether my feelings will be personally influenced or not has nothing to do with anything. But going back to actually addressing it and just entertaining the hypothetical, I would carry that embryo to term because there's something else to this whole thing that a lot of pro reports don't like to take into account. Well, I'm not going to say they don't like to take it into account, but they just don't take it into account. And the fact is, excuse me. The fact is, when, especially for me being a Christian, where you're coming from a Christian uh, point of view, when you are having a sort of close bond with the saints in your church, when you are in a good church, or you care about when you are surrounded by people who care about you, a lot of ways how you look at things can be heavily influenced to the point of where they may change how you look at things entirely. You see, a lot of pro aborts like to look at situations like women are going to be alone, or maybe they're starting off at a point to where they don't seem to have anybody to turn to, and where they may at first not have anyone to turn to or to help them out. But the problem is a lot of excuse me. The problem is a lot of pro aborts like to frame it in those terms, like they're just bearing all the burden and the emotional stress and all these things, and they're bearing all these things by themselves. Like, yeah, there's definitely not going to be anybody to help them. There's not going to be anybody to hold their hand through the process. There's not going to be anybody to really support them. They treat these situations as if the worst possible situations are always the reality. Like they just alone, they're just not getting any support. Nobody's there for them whatsoever to help them with anything, spiritually, physically, mentally, emotionally, any of that stuff. But the reality is you have situations to where, yeah, it may not be people currently there to lend that support, but there are also many times to where women start off alone, and then once they seek the help they need to deal with those situations, they generally can get it. And they generally have loving people there to support them and to give them that financial support, that spiritual support, that emotional support, all those things. So where they don't have to shoulder the burden all themselves. And especially when you walk in a Christian life, it becomes more and more evident how true that really is. When you get around a bunch of saints who truly love you and who truly want the best for you, and uh, who are walking the path that Christ wants them to walk, you get them, you get the support that you need to overcome these horrific situations. You're not alone. So there is hope offered in the Christian life in these situations, which heavily, heavily changes the outlook of these horrific circumstances. That's what's so awesome about Christianity. That's what's so awesome. And even about certain aspects of religion, as opposed to atheism and secularism. And this isn't me saying that there's no good atheists out there, or there's no good secular entities that will help women in these situations. I'm not making that argument. But the point is, there's a whole lot of faith in Christian organizations out there that lend massive support to women in these situations. And these women are not alone. In fact, a lot of these entities make it their lifelong goals, their mission to take care of these women. They make it their mission to see to it that they have everything they need, everything they could ever want out of a bad situation like that. All the support that they could usually more support than they could even conceive that they would even get. Excuse me again. This is the point behind why Jesus tells us to love our neighbor as ourselves, because that encompasses uh, so many areas in life. When you love your neighbor as yourself, it's that very principle, it's that very moral worldview that changes how a lot of things are looked at, drastically changes the hearts of a lot of people, drastically changes how we approach life in many situations. There seems to be this other darkness propagated and just preached over and over again in the so-called pro-choice and pro-abortion worldview. There seems to be this darkness of it all, this hopelessness, this despair. It's just a bitter, um, just a bitter existence, just a hopeless existence, and it's disgusting to me. It's really sick. This is the sort of place I believe that a lot of these pro boards are coming from when they talk about this stuff. They're coming from a place of darkness. They're coming from a place of hopelessness. They're coming from a place of uh, faithlessness. They're coming from these very dark places, and that's outside of any good arguments. The most cruel thing, the most crucial thing, I should say, not the most cruel thing, but the most crucial thing. Well, it is cruel at the same time, but the most crucial thing is faithlessness. I mean, I'm not saying that life is about pie in the sky or about denying reality. I'm not saying that life is about trying to trick yourself or delude yourself or anything like this. But my issue is that they don't even entertain the possibility that there are a lot more hopeful things available to women who want to help themselves, and not just help themselves, but help themselves and their children. They don't entertain the possibility that there's hope out there, that there's people out there who love them and will support them through these horrific ordeals. So we have Built for Speed in the chat. That's a faithful brother who comes around a lot. What's up, man? It's always good to see you. I always appreciate that brother's support. But yeah, they come from this place of utter darkness, of utter hopelessness, this utter despair. It is horrible that this is the worldview that they come from. So, what would I do as a man? I would carry that fetus to term. I would carry that child to term. That's what I do. Excuse me. At least I'm telling you that's what I'd hope I do. Because as I said, like my choices may be very well influenced if I were born differently, if I were born a lady, or if I had different circumstances in life, if I came from a different background. But so what? I mean, I can say the same thing about pro aborts. If they have came from a different background, or it was born a woman, if they were actually born a man, and vice versa, if they came from a different background, they might look at things entirely different. They may be sitting right here agreeing with me. But again, it just is what it is. We need to talk about things as they are, not so much about hypotheticals. I'm not saying that hypotheticals can't be helpful to paint a picture, but uh, ultimately, hypotheticals can only go so far. What matters is what is the reality? What are the facts? And the facts are is that there are people out there who care about these women in these situations. That's the facts. They don't have to shoulder these burdens alone. Excuse me. Women don't have to shoulder these burdens alone. They don't have to carry the emotional baggage by themselves, and when you got women out there that can see that, and lots of women have seen this and have brought their babies into the world and have experienced the peace, uh yeah, not just the love and the joy and the happiness, but more importantly, they've experienced the peace that that people who care about you offer. They experience the peace that Jesus offers. So I think beyond giving hypothetical scenarios and trying to pin people down in these emotive filled arguments, I mean, let's just be real. It's an attempt to construct it logically, I guess, but I wasn't born yesterday. The motive of the argument is motivated emotionally, albeit attempted to be constructed in a logical way. But what would I do as a man in regards to abortion? If it were me, I'd carry the child term. That's what I'd do. So if you want to ask me hypothetical questions, I'm going to give you hypothetical answers. Excuse me. But again, like I said, hypotheticals can only get us so far. There's only so much we can touch on, so much uh, that can be bridged. Only so much that can be accomplished by bringing those up. That don't make them not useful. That don't make them irrelevant. It just means that they have their limits. But it's interesting. A lot of the same people who bring up these hypotheticals and want to talk about these these situations to try to find some sort of way to push me or others into supporting abortion. It's interesting. A lot of these same people don't seem to be out there doing the work. I mean, and this is just my anecdotal experience, but in my observation, the people who are out there doing the work the most are believers, or Christians, or people of other higher belief systems. A lot of them don't seem to be atheists at all. And again, I'm not saying atheists don't exist. They're out there doing the work and are out there lending a helping hand. I'm not saying non-believers aren't doing it, but that hasn't been my personal consistent experience. Not at all. No, sir. All you people talk about is her having the legal choice to kill her baby. That's all you guys care about. Beyond that, I bet you most of you wouldn't get off your backsides and do a thing other than that. A lot of them accuse pro lifers of saying, "Oh, you guys only care about the children until they're brought into the world," and then you don't say a thing about them. Don't do much of anything, if anything at all, when they're born, which is by and large a total lie, or at the very least, don't represent um, the vast majority of pro-lifers that I know. But by the same sort of logic, you guys are only talk about keeping abortion legal, but you don't do anything beyond just keeping abortion legal. Because what do you do when a woman regrets her abortion? And, she made her choice. There's nothing she can do to change it. What do you do? Where are you? Are you, or what kind of support could you possibly offer? What are you gonna say? Well, I'm sorry, but you made your choice. What are you gonna tell her? Oh, I'm sorry, but you might have been led astray to feel that way by these anti-choice lifers or something. What are you gonna tell her? Conjunk says God does nothing for kids when they are here. Well, I'm not going to even get into that. I'm not going to entertain statements that you have no possibility of backing up whatsoever. So that's a whole other issue. But like I said, where are you guys at if a woman does regret her abortion? What are you going to tell her? Oh, she only lost a clump of cells, so she has no reason to feel that way. There'll be absolutely nothing you guys can offer her to help her get through that situation. I can back that up. I'm just joking. Obviously, he meant I can back that up, but well, you and I have already had a conversation a while back, kind drunk, and um, I do appreciate that you were very respectful, but you didn't particularly, in my opinion, do too well in that conversation. 17 kids under the age of 5 every day. Word is God. See, excuse me, excuse me. Sorry. See, this relies on so many overlooked premises, so much stuff that is not taken into account. I get this idea that a lot of these non-believers, they seem to think either there must be some sort of divine miracle saving these kids 24/7 and everywhere in every place, or there's nothing happening for these children. You want to talk about, again, it goes back to what I said earlier. When you got women out there who regret their abortions, or when you got women out there who want to bring their child into the world, who's out there doing the work? It's usually believers. Now, when you talk about these kids, uh, who's out there, like for example, in missionary work, who's out there doing the work, going overseas to help these kids in these impoverished situations in these impoverished countries? Who's out there doing the work? Usually believers, usually Christians. A lot of these non-believers, again, I'm not saying this represents them all, but a substantial amount of non-believers I've come across in my lifetime, all they do is just complain, complain, complain. But a lot of them aren't out there actually doing the work. I'd rather you not believe in God, but you actually be out there doing work, than for you to complain about God allegedly not being there, but you don't do a thing about it. If you're not out there contributing to any solutions, then your complaints are meaningless. And as far as I'm concerned, they just fall on deaf ears, and justifiably so. Excuse me. So get out there and do the work. You run your mouth talking about where's God this, where's God that. Well, if you honestly believe that God doesn't exist, then where are you? That's the real issue. If you honestly believe that God does not exist and there's no God, and then the only people who are going to be there to help these kids is man, then you get out there and do the work. And I think maybe more people will start to take you seriously if you are actually out there doing the work. But until you actually get out there and do the work, and you're talking about where's God this and where's God that, that's not going to mean a thing to me. As Frank Turek puts it, and I think he puts it fantastically, if that's even the word, fantastically. But excuse me, I think Frank Turek puts it in a very fantastic way. He says, like, when children die, they simply change the location, and whatever suffering, because I mean, there's always going to be kids that's going to be outside the reach of our arms. There's always kids that we're not going to be able to reach. But for the kids that die and they go into heaven, they go into paradise on the other side, the eternal joy and the eternal peace, the eternal happiness, and the eternal freedom from this vile world that they experience by far outweighs whatever suffering that they experience in this temporal plane, in this temporal world. So that's the view I think a lot of believers hold. So they just simply change location, and um, the release that they have in eternal paradise outweighs any suffering that they experience in this world. But check this out, though. From your own personal worldview, if kids just die and there's no God, then they don't know anything after death. They basically came from nothing and they went back to nothing. And that's just it. There's no suffering, no nothing, no anything. So they whine all day about whatever suffering children experience uh, temporarily in this world, knowing that they're going to be dead and dead forever once they die. And they're the ones that say that there's no ultimate meaning, there's no ultimate uh there's no ultimate anything, there's no ultimate meaning, there's no ultimate judgment, um there's no ultimate consummation for the lives we experience, for what we've done in this life, what we experienced in this life. There's no ultimate consummation to bring it all to full circle. So when they pass from this world, it's going to be it for them, and they're going to be dead for a long time after that. And the amount of time they're going to be dead is going to be nothing compared to the time they're going to be alive. But they're the ones talking about there is no ultimate meaning, there is no ultimate judgment, no ultimate anything. We just have this life. And they whine and complain so much about the temporal suffering they experience. And that's not going to define what's going to be ultimately anyway. Why should we even care? Why should we care at all? It's like because we want our species to survive. Well, so what? Who said? Well, you said that. You and some other people theorized that we got that into our evolutionary makeup, and that's what should be the case. Should don't come from a world of molecules and motion of chemical reactions. Should and ought don't really truly exist in any meaningful capacity. Should and ought is prescriptive. And I understand this gets into uh, sort of a side segue discussion about meaning and ultimate and, and ultimate purpose and things like this. I understand that, but when you having these sorts of discussions, that's just the necessary, inevitable byproduct of where these discussions lead to, which undergirds, I think, a lot of what we talk about in the abortion debate. But but to go back to the previous point, atheists have nothing other than their whiny opinions about what happens in this world. They have nothing, but I would say even from their own worldview, even if they truly believe God doesn't exist, go out and do something in the world. You complaining to believers about, in your view, believing in an irrelevant, non-existing God isn't going to do anything for those children you say are suffering. If you spent more time actually being productive in the world, you wouldn't have anywhere near the time to complain about God. And Christians who believe in what you say is this irrational or evil, non-existent, so on and so forth entity. So nobody cares how much you whine and complain. Nobody cares about how much you cry and are upset, go out there and do some work. And these atheists are going to spend the rest of their life saying how much God hasn't done this and God hasn't done that and blah, blah, blah. Well, either you could spend your rest of your life complaining about the non-existence of God and how much he hasn't done and how much he's religion has brainwashed people and so on and so forth, or you can out there and actually do some productive work. There's people right now who go to soup kitchens that you can devote your free time to. It doesn't take a whole lot of your time out to do it. Excuse me. It doesn't take a whole lot of your time out to do it. You can go to your local soup kitchen, even if you only do it once a week. That'll be a lot more than what many of you are doing right now. Nothing. There's a lot that can be done in this world, and I think although you wouldn't be able to have any sort of reason why you're doing it, because I mean we just matter and motion and everything's meaningless, and but I'd still respect that you were actually doing something. But let's just take it from your standpoint. Let's just say, well, there is no God whatsoever. Well, you know what? Us religious folk, us religio tards, or whatever you want to call us, if we believe in actual in this being that don't exist, that don't take away the work that we've actually done and are doing still and will do. So even if you were hypothetically correct that this God that we believe in doesn't exist, that don't take away the work that's actually been done, and that has been done and is being done and will be done. That doesn't take away any of that. So we can do two things at once. We can praise God, and we can be out there doing the work, and that's what a lot of believers are doing. They're praising God, and then they're out there doing the work, and not just talking about the love of Christ. They're out there actually doing the work. They're out there actually living the life that He wants them to live. Despite the fact that we may stumble, and despite the fact that we are hypocrites at times and things like that, I think for the most part, He carries us to come back to Him and to correct our hypocrisies, to correct our errors, and to continually seek His ways. So, yeah, we're not going to be able to reach every child. We're not going to be able to help everyone. But I'd say by and large, people who do believe in God are doing a lot more than you guys are. I mean, you can just do the research and find out that people who tend to be religious leaning, who tend to believe in God and things like this, tend to be more likely to uh, contribute to charitable causes, to do missionary work, to contribute in all sorts of good and powerful ways in the world than people who don't believe in God. So if you guys' whole ordeal and whole thing is about just what we have here now and about the work we can do now, then why doesn't it seem reflective in what you guys believe? If nothing else, believers, we see it two ways. We look at what we can do now. Excuse me. We look at what we can do now, and also what what will be done in the world to come. From our worldview, we look at what can be done and what will be done in the world to come. What we can do now and what will be done in the world to come. So nonsense, this nonsense about like what is God doing or why God doesn't seem to be there. I say your little ignorant observations is not evidence that God is not there. Progress says, what about Muslims? Well, what about them? I think they do a lot more than a lot of you atheists do. Obviously, I don't agree with them in their religious texts, and they're clearly extreme and anti-women views and things like this. But I think they do a whole lot than a lot of atheists do. Or maybe at least the peaceful Muslims do. I'd say I'll separate the peaceful Muslims from those like ISIS type Muslims, those extremists. This conversation really drifted off into a number of different areas, but to get back to the original point, what would I do as a man? I think not only myself, but a lot of other men, excuse me, a lot of other men would bring their kids into term and would bring, even in that ridiculously contrived hypothetical situation, I think a lot of men would stand up. But then again, if a lot of those men represented men in this culture, men who talk about, well, it's up to a woman what she does. If they were thinking exactly like that, if fetus was inside of them, I mean, most of these, some, I'm not gonna say most of them, but I'd say a lot of those men would probably think no different than these women who get these abortions. So I think it just depends on whatever culture you're living in. But I personally, as a man, again, my views may be influenced if I were to be born into a different set of circumstances, or if I were born a woman. Yeah, my views may be influenced, but again, it was a hypothetical situation, and I'm giving a hypothetical answer. But the important thing is that women don't carry these, or at least they don't have to carry these burdens by themselves. And to go back to what I initially was talking about, it's just the darkness, the hopelessness, the faithlessness of the non-believing paradigm, the non-believing worldview. It's those worldviews that do really nothing at all. I'm not gonna say really nothing. They do nothing at all to help women. They do nothing at all other than say, well, you just have a choice and you should just have a choice to either continue this pregnancy to term or to abort it. They talk about one thing, that's about her having a choice, but the fact is, we have choices in a number of areas in life, but that don't make those choices justified. I mean, we have choices to whether we hit somebody in the face or not, but that don't mean it's okay for us to make the decision just to hit some random person in the face. Just because you have a choice doesn't mean anything. Excuse me. And you might say, well, a woman can't be legally prosecuted, so she has that choice. But even before, even before abortion was made legal in places like the United States, you had a lot of these same people who wanted to get it into law thinking it should be her choice. So it doesn't matter whether it's legal or not. It's about the idea that you think it should be a choice at all. But that's all they really have to offer is that it's just a choice, but they don't really do much beyond that. When you think going to Planned Parenthood and contributing financially to Planned Parenthood is you like doing this good work. What is Planned Parenthood doing for women who regret their abortions? Nothing. Planned Parenthood is there to do things to possibly, very, very likely lead women into getting abortions. That's what Planned Parenthood is there for. They're not there to help these women. They're there to take their money and to leave them to their own devices. That's what they're there for, wherever those devices may be. And it's not pro-lifers that want their money. I mean, you want to talk about women getting into bad financial situations, but it's not pro-lifers that want their money. It's not crisis pregnancy centers who want their money. Crisis pregnancy centers are free, but abortion clinics and abortion centers like Planned Parenthood are not free. So if you want to talk about financial burdens, Planned Parenthood takes their money, kills their child, and then that's a wrap. At crisis pregnancy centers, and I'm not talking about cases to where people have done ridiculous things at crisis pregnancy centers because, I mean, I understand there has been some bad cases, but there's bad cases in just about everything. They don't define the general occurrence of what happens in those places. But generally speaking, they don't take their money and they provide all support in the world to those women. until they get to a point to where they can be in a situation, to be in a circumstance where they can uh, emotionally, financially, and everything in between, to where they can fully support themselves and their child. And even at that point, a lot of them are still there, present in their lives. What do these pro reports offer? Yeah, we're gonna go to this clinic, and we're gonna say this clinic over here is going to allow you to kill your child, and that option should be on the table, and whatever you want to do, that's up to you. And whatever happens from that, it's whatever. That's all I hear from the pro-abortion positions, that there should only be the choice on the table. There's nothing beyond that, really. What does that do for women? Well, you just have a choice there, and that's that. But even if women initially choose the option of termination, excuse me, that's not going to define how they're going to feel after the fact. They may feel, they may feel fine about it at first, but perhaps the gravity of them hits them at a later point in a way that they didn't expect, in a way that they didn't anticipate. I mean, emotion is a funny thing. I mean, they may you have women that may not feel bad about it personally for all their lives, and they may be even more hardcore towards the pro-choice position and the advocacy of it. But on the other side of that, you have those women that may feel fine about it, and then they get that decision, and and there's no turn back for them, and they they have an emptiness. There's a void in their hearts because they realize that they've just killed their child, and there's an emptiness. There's a loss. There's a darkness in that place. But because of the amazing love and mercy of Jesus Christ, and the amazing peace and the amazing grace and love that he offers, a lot of women who have regretted their abortions have been able to come back from that dark place and do a lot of positive things in this world. Non believers have nothing to offer those women. I could speak to any of those women who have dealt with those situations, and ask them what would a non believer been able to offer them? Nothing. So you have Con Drunk saying a bunch of stuff in the chat. Let me ask you a question, Con Drunk. If a woman would regret her abortion, what would you offer her? What would you have to say? You know, you don't come from a paradigm of God and anything like that. There's no God, there's no nothing after this existence, this plane of existence. What would you offer her? What would you tell her? Depends on why. I mean, what would it matter why? The point is, she regrets it. What would it matter why? Offers support. Non-believers offers love, support, and reality. Please. Well, I'd say uh, uh, secularist pro-lifers may. I would actually agree with that to a degree. I say secularist pro-lifers do. Uh, Secularist pro-aborts, no. Just no. But if you take the worldview of non-believers and apply it in its most consistent context, excuse me, if you apply it in its most consistent context, there's nothing after this life. There's no ultimate meaning. There's no ultimate hope. No nothing. So anything you were to offer her would just be based on ultimately nothing. That's nothing worthy of anything. You're trying to offer her redemption in the redemptionless world. If you think you can offer her any hope, you're trying to offer hope in a hopeless world. If you try to offer peace, or attempting to offer her peace in a world with no peace. Well, I mean, it may be the case that I mean, better is a very subjective term. So I think there's a lot of loaded language in your question. Can you say your life is better than an atheist? I think that's a very loaded question. I think a lot of atheists would define life as the sort of material happiness that they can reach for themselves in this life, the sort of gain that they can acquire from the admiration of other men and mankind and things like this. That's what they would define as better. So my definition of better may not be yours. So uh, that's kind of a strange question to ask. We don't have the same definition of what better means. Atheists live just as well as believers without the fairy tales. Well, I mean, we could play this game about fairy tales all day, but basically, the atheist fairy tale is once upon a time long ago, there was nothing whatsoever, and somehow everything existed, and things happened, and over billions, maybe even trillions of years, we went back to nothing. The end. If that's not a fairy tale, then I don't know what is. Excuse me. Fortia or Fortia, whatever that name, however that name is pronounced, Fortia Fortia Madness says, I was a Christian for 20 years and being an atheist for only 5 of my life has been 100 times better. Well, I mean, it just depends on whatever you want in life. What are your priorities? What are your desires? What are your goals? I mean, if your goals are um, gain of the self and um, just the prosperity of the self, if that's your goals, and then yeah, I think in many ways atheism supplies that in spades. But Christianity is the very antithesis of that. It's about denying yourself, not about gain for yourself. In Christianity, you find yourself when you deny yourself to Jesus. In the Christian worldview, you lose yourself if you are full of yourself. So, I mean, it really just depends on exactly what you were really looking for. So, I mean, if you feel like your life was 100 times better by being an atheist, then okay, that don't mean anything to me. It certainly has nothing to do with whether uh, the atheist or Christian worldview is true. The goal was to find the truth, not for simple pleasures. What is the truth? From your standpoint, from your view, what is the truth? Would you actually like to come into this room and discuss this with me? That's what I would be interested in. Would you like to come into this room and tell me what is true? Give an argument for uh, this reality you found that give you all this life, that gave you all this liberation or whatever it gave you, whatever made your life 100 times better. Well, he says sure, but here's what I'll do. Um, Given the fact that I'm on a library timer, I have to reset this computer. But what I will do is after I reset this computer, I'll start off another hangout. And then once the hangout starts, you'll be invited in. So just give me a few minutes and the link will be coming your way. I mean, I'm going to have to give it to you in a PM or something like that because I can't just put it out there. Obviously, because I don't want this room sniped. Excuse me, but to end this section of the hangout, uh, I was just talking about what I would do as a man in regards to abortion, and I made that quite clear that although my views could be influenced in a number of different ways, I still would hope that I'll hold to the same firm views. But whatever I would do, hypothetically speaking, don't relate to the facts. They don't relate to whether abortion itself is morally justifiable or not. So, on one sense, it's an interesting hypothetical question to think about, but in another sense, it's meaningless. It's pointless. But I'm about to reset this, start up another hangout, and see what For Sure, 4D of Madness, and maybe some other people have to say about what they think about their lives, about what atheism has offered them, the challenge to Christian, whatever we want to talk about in those terms. I'm interested to hear what they have to say. So, thank you so much for watching this long. If you guys have made it through this hangout for this long, and I'll see you in a bit.